I heard this voice at 7 years old. It was very loud and clear. And that voice said to me, Dellena, don't be like the rest of the world, that I love everybody. Everybody is equal. And I listened to that voice. My job is a crisis job. I get calls from families, loved ones, looking for help and services for their loved one with addiction issues. And the other thing I do is I am a foster mother. I have 2 girls. 30 years ago, I just accepted the fact that I was going to die and that I was going to be a prostitute for the rest of my life. But I knew that I wasn't going to live a long life. And, God had a different plan for me. My mother was married to my father, divorced him when she was pregnant with me. She remarried a guy and had 6 more kids. In my eyes, the world was a very ugly world at 7. From the time I can remember, I was called every B word, every F word. I was stupid. I would never be anything. Nobody cares about you. That's how my mother spoke to me. My stepfather would come in that room at night, and my sister, who was 12 years old, he was molesting, and we would all be, sleeping on the floor on a mattress full of feces and cockroaches, and we lived in filth. My sister got pregnant, and she got 8 months pregnant, and school turned my mother in, and they came and took me and my sister out of that home. When I went to foster care, my mother never came and visited me. She never wrote me a letter, never called, nothing. So I felt really alone in the world. I felt like I didn't have anybody at all. And by that time, I was pretty angry. They would put me in a padded room because I would throw fits of tantrums, and then they would let me come out. And that's how they dealt with me. I never was given any therapy for any of the abuse, nothing. And my mom never showed up. So from 7 to 12, I never seen my mother one time. 12 years old, one day they come in and say to me, "You're going home." The reason that my mom wanted me home was because my stepfather wanted me home, because he liked 12-year-old girls. That was the perfect age for him. We were poor. We had no money. And so they would allow men to come and stay in our home. They would pay them money, and they knew what they were going to do. And they would molest me. And they were known pedophiles. It was not just me. It was my sisters, too. And maybe even my brothers. And that's when I ran away at 12. And that's when my first pimp found me. He was 21 years old. I had nowhere to go. And he took me to his mother's house and he raped me. Him raping me at his mother's house, that was normal. So I didn't feel like I was being raped because that already happened to me, right? So it was normal. And then he proceeded to prepare me to put me out on the streets. I looked like I was 12. And so, as soon as the police seen me, they picked me up and said, "Get in the car." They laughed because here a 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl wearing hot pants, high heels, a rabbit coat, and, I look like a little child, right? So in a lot of ways that saved me because I looked so young. I didn't look old enough. It didn't matter how much makeup you put on me. I still looked like a little girl. That proceeded to happen over and over. Go to juvenile hall, get out, and they'd put me in the group home. I'd run away. He would get a hold of me, find me wherever I'm at. Now, mind you, this person told me that when I got in that car, that he loved me, that he was going to take care of me, he's going to marry me one day. I mean, that's all I wanted, was to be loved, right? That's why these girls stay in that, because somebody's telling them that they love them. And even though they start beating on you and start hitting on you and calling you names, but they still say, "I still love you." You accept that, right? Because somebody cares for you. They're very good at swaying, young girls, that telling them all the right things and being really sweet to them and buying them really nice stuff. And they might do that for a month or two. And you never see the ugly side until he becomes your pimp. You are not allowed to look at any other man ever, not even look him in the eye. And I remember being in the car with two pimps and another girl, and they had a dog. They had one of those very expensive dogs in the car, and the dog went to the bathroom in the car. The pimp beat the girl so bad for letting the dog do that in the car. I remember some pimps making a girl have sex with the dog. I mean, some horrible things I could tell you. Made the girl eat dog poop. I've seen girls tortured. He would throw me down flights of stairs. When I was pregnant, he threatened to throw me down the flight of stairs. The only thing that stopped him was his mother pulled a shotgun out on him. His mother killed both of her husbands, her first and second husband. So a lot of violence in the family. So I was always living in fear. Always in fear. At 14, I got pregnant by him. I ended up in an unwedded mother's home, and I was going to give him up because of him. I had him a month early. I ended up in the emergency room, and when I looked at him, that was him. This is him. When I looked at him, I couldn't do it. He just wanted me out there working the streets, so he said, well, we'll just give the baby to my mom. She just got me a fake ID that said I was 18 years old. That's how I was able to work in the brothel. Right after I went to the brothel, he got arrested for a double homicide. He was a killer. This was a guy, he would get other girls, he would torture them, he would put cigarettes out on them and tell them if they weren't working for him, he was going to kill them. And so I do still have fears about that, about him getting out one day. It'd be easy for him to find me and killing me. His mother, she became my pimp. And she used the money for fix her house up, pay her bills, buy herself stuff. The Mustang Ranch. Oh, it was a nightmare. It was horrible. I felt very alone. I couldn't tell anybody anything that was going on. I couldn't tell anybody I was a runaway. I couldn't, because then they would turn me in, right? And so I had to live a very secretive life because I looked so young that all the Johns wanted me. Like it was one after another. And I would work 12-hour shifts, and I would just be so tired and just so worn out. And I felt like I couldn't get enough sleep. I'd have to get right back up and get right back on the floor. I thought it was disgusting. I'd get a lot of complaints from the Johns for putting condoms on them, sneaking them on them. So I was fired for that. I was 16. Pimps were always trying to get other pimps' girls. When they see you don't have a pimp now, guess what? They're all after you. They would see me and start trying to talk to me, and then they would talk that good talk too, right? Like, I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to treat you better than him, and you believe that as a kid, right? You're a kid. Even though I was 16, emotionally I was a child. People don't realize that even the girls that are 16 and 17 out there, they're children emotionally. Emotionally, I was a child. This other pimp took me, and at that time I had my son, Dellena. And he took my son to his sister's house, held my son as ransom, took me to Las Vegas, and then said I was going to work for him until I made him some money. And a guy rescued me. It was a John who gave me a bunch of money. He was actually part of the mafia. And he said, go get your child. And took me to the airport, put me on a plane, and I was there for about 2 weeks. I had an illegal abortion, almost died from that. As I got older in my 20s and I moved to San Francisco and I hooked up with my second son's father. He wasn't a pimp, he was a drug dealer. He had never had a girl who worked the streets. But once I started making him money, guess what? I had to go out there. He was the one that turned me on to the heroin. When I found the heroin, then I could do it, right? It was like heaven for me. All the pain was gone immediately. And I was happy, at least I thought I was. My addiction progressed so badly that I ended up homeless on the streets. And then I had nowhere to go. I had been arrested on an average 62 times per year on an average for prostitute-related charges. I was in jail 3 to 4 times a week. It was a normal thing for me. All that other time I was with all these other pimps, and I would, get away from them, and I would always go back to the first pimp's mother's house because I knew that she would help me somehow. She'd at least give me a roof, somewhere to sleep, right? And I had her grandson, so I always could go back to her. But she was always trying to get me back out on the streets. A little over 20 years ago, I heard that voice again. That voice that I heard when I was 7. And I knew then it was God. I heard it loud and clear. And I remember hearing it saying, Dellena, you're going to die. And is this the legacy that you want to leave your 2 sons? A prostitute dying in a motel room with a needle in her. A woman took me to her home from the 12-step program. She fed me. She clothed me. She took me to meetings. She took me out, showed me how to fill out a job application. She took me to the bank to show me how to open a bank account at 30. Okay? So, and that's where my life began, right there, with that woman, a human being that just took a little extra time. And she helped me do everything. She taught me how to talk, taught me how to have a conversation with somebody. I couldn't even open my mouth and talk. It took me months to just even be able to have a conversation with somebody. And I covered my face with my hair because I had so much shame. I couldn't look you in the eyes. And to be around a man was very difficult. To even sit next to a man was very difficult. I mean, I remember going on a first date and it was horrible for me. I remember just sitting on the couch like this. I was so afraid. I couldn't even talk. It was like being a little girl in a 30-year-old body. For my post-traumatic stress disorder, therapy for 3 years, and I had been seeing a psychologist that did some EMDR with me. I prayed myself to sleep at night because I knew somebody was going to come in and kill me. So I would sleep on my back with my hand over my eyes. So if somebody was going to come in, I wouldn't see them killing me. For many years, for my first 15 years in recovery, when you walked in my house, I had a weapon in every hand's reach and everywhere in my house. I had baseball bats, knives, pepper spray, anything that I could use to protect myself, I had in my house. I would be under the couches. You would pick my couch up and you would see knives under there, and everywhere, anywhere that I could grab. The longer I was sober, that I started realizing how God was using me. The reason I became a foster mother was because children in the foster care system girls are at higher risk of becoming trafficked. And so when I opened my home, it was to take in girls who have been trafficked. And so for my first 2 years, those were all the girls that I had. I haven't had any in the last couple of years. But I have, every girl that I have is at risk. I get to show them what the important things in life are and to help them and encourage them and love them. I have a little girl. She's me. She's at high risk of being trafficked. She's 12. And I tell her this: I'm here for you, to support you and encourage you and help you to know God's word. And that's what I tell her, right? And I said, and even if you do veer off, know who your Father is, right? That He loves you and that He's with you. He says He'll never leave you nor forsake you. And that's what I tell any other 12-year-old little girl in the foster care system. There's a lot of reasons, that we need to support this. We need to all stand up because it could be your daughter or it could be your son. If we keep people accountable, if we have laws in place to protect these children, then they're less likely to do it, right?